So here we are going to look at a scenario where Russia succeeds in their invasion of Ukraine and goes to war with NATO. So let's just set up the borders here. Okay, so they're currently in a war with Ukraine. Okay, so currently Russia controls this area in the Donbass region, and here we are going to add Belarus to this conflict. They just kind of decide that they want to be annexed by Russia, so that's going to happen. So, there, Belarus opts to join Russia, and at this point, so the Americans they have a staunch anti giving aid to Ukraine at this point policies in the West. So Europe is actually stepping up for the lack of aid that America is giving, and they are getting much more involved. So this involves countries like Poland, who is spending an absurd amount of money on military because they think that a war with Russia is imminent, and they are on the front lines with them. So it's important for them to have a massive military. They have one of the biggest militaries in NATO. So Russia is just going to keep advancing, and they will keep advancing as long as there is less support from the US, and just since Russia has overwhelming numbers, and eventually they will end up reaching kind of a stalemate line, and the war kind of comes to a standstill. Here in Moldova, there are Russian troops like stationed along the border because this is a place with a lot of ethnic Russians, and you know what that means? It means that Russia's going to come invade you. So, at this point, Ukraine is starting to lose more and more from all sides. Invasion from Belarus, it's basically just a province of Russia, but it's called Belarus, even though it's part of Russia. It's coming from the north, and they're basically just cutting off everywhere but Kyiv, because capturing Kyiv is just going to be too difficult. Like, they failed before, and they don't want to fail again. So there is going to be a new border created, so I'm just going to make that right now. Alright, so this is kind of what the world looks like now. Alright, so Russia gains a large portion of Ukrainian territory, along with completely annexing the Crimean Peninsula, and during the war also Belarus. At this point, NATO is starting to get a little bit scared because there are only, except for Moldova, there are only NATO countries surrounding Russia and Ukraine now. Like the Baltics, Finland, Poland, and Romania, Slovakia, Hungary, Turkey, and Bulgaria. And this is Russia. They don't get a lot of support for this annexation, even though like it's recognized because they control it, and they're controlling it with their military and oppressing the Ukrainians living there. But like they're reluctantly, like the European powers are reluctantly, they're hoping that Russian aggression will force them to come face to face with NATO, and so they can kind of regulate Russian aggression. So at this point, to make this scenario more interesting, the U.S. is going to decide to leave NATO, and this is something that Donald Trump, who is a presidential nominee, has stated that he would like to do at some point, and he wouldn't be opposed to it. So that's kind of scary. And so yeah, this makes Europe a lot more nervous about they don't have any protection now from the U.S. So they have to kind of fend for themselves. And Poland is already spending a lot of money, but Germany is also going to ramp up their military spending, along with Greece, Romania, Hungary, France, Finland, Sweden, the UK, and all these countries who are still part of NATO. NATO still exists, but it kind of got cut in half with power. I would say Europe is still a little bit stronger than Russia, but it's a lot more even now, and it's not completely decided what would happen in a war. So with the US leaving the alliance of NATO, this kind of emboldens Russia even more. At this point, Putin has died, but one of his goons, like someone who's shares his ideas, taken his place, and wishes to restore the greatness of the Russian Empire. And so they are going to keep expanding. And they're going to start invading into Georgia. They already have troops in this area and this area of Georgia. And so they're going to just keep going in and invading the country. They're going to cut off the access to the Black Sea, and eventually Georgia cannot really do anything. So they're going to retreat into the mountains, and Russia is going to kind of stall a little bit. In the meantime, while their military is in the Caucasus, they are going to violently suppress the Chechens who have de facto independence and kind of regain that control over that area. So this war is kind of coming to a stalemate, and they kind of reach peace terms, and Georgia they don't want to be at war anymore. So Russia is just going to invade and annex this part of the country. All right, so this is kind of the peace that was made. Russia didn't want to spend excess resources trying to subdue Georgia, considering that they couldn't even subdue Ukraine for years, and Georgia is much more mountainous and difficult to invade. So they decided to come to a peace, and this is the border that came out. Georgia kind of has a little bit of coast on the Black Sea, but not enough to be relevant and very easy to blockade. Russia gained a lot of territory along the Black Sea and in the northern part of Georgia. At this point, it's probably around 2030, and Russia is feeling pretty good about themselves. They have annexed Belarus, they have Ukraine, and they have Ukraine as a puppet state. They have annexed like half of Ukraine, as well as Crimea and parts of Georgia. And now they feel strong enough to be able to take on some of these stronger countries in the world, such as NATO, which doesn't have the US anymore and is more well matched against Russia. So, with some boldness, the Russian government is going to decide to declare war on the Baltic states and start a massive conflict. And of course, Russia is going to invade the Baltics first, but that is going to trigger Article 5 of NATO, and all NATO members are going to have to declare war on Russia. And that is a lot of countries. Alright, I'm pretty sure that is Turkey, who decides to not follow Article 5, and because they kind of align more with Russia, and they decide to join Russia in their ambition. And Ukraine, they're a puppet state, so they are going to be like that, and so is Georgia. And this breaks out into a massive, worldwide almost conflict, and Iran also is sympathetic to the Russian cause, but Saudi Arabia is not, and yeah, this develops into a massive geopolitical conflict. And India obviously supports Russia. They are really good allies in real life. In Cyprus is where Turkey wants the entire island, but half of it is controlled by NATO and the other half by Turkey. So let's begin this conflict where it initially started, in the Baltic countries. So Russia is just going to sweep through this area. It is a completely flat plain, and their modern tank-based military is going to completely destroy any defense that was made. Even though there are a lot of preparation from the Baltics, they can't really stand up to something that's 100 times bigger than them. And even from Kaliningrad, they're going to meet up and form a cohesive front, and up until Estonia is going to fall, and then Latvia is going to get half of it taken, and the rest of Lithuania is going to fall as well. And this leaves only Latvia left on this peninsula here, which they hold out for a little bit, although Russia is encroaching slowly. Meanwhile, in Poland, they have a plan. They want to blitz Kaliningrad and Belarus, and they add their troops there, and they are trying to liberate Lithuania as well. And they are sending more and more forces out into Belarus, which is concerning for Russia. They also, with the help of other allied soldiers, are going in to liberate Ukraine. And when they're seen in Ukraine, they are seen as liberators and bringers of peace and Western democracy. And a lot of the Ukrainians like this. Of course, not all of them do, but they have been oppressed a lot under being a Russian puppet. So they are quite happy to revolt against the Russian government. In Kiev, Kiev is like here. There is a revolt, and that is quickly suppressed by the Russian government, who sends troops into Ukraine yet again. Like I said, they are sending troops into Ukraine yet again, and they are blitzing through because they passed all of they basically own half of Ukraine. And the government of Ukraine allows them to get into this area. They make some naval landings here in the south by Odessa, I believe it is. And yeah, they do end up almost reaching the Allies, which I'm gonna refer to NATO as the Allies because they are allies if you think about it. And yeah, a front line kind of emerges. So back in Turkey, in Cyprus, Turkey is just gonna wipe out the entire thing, and yeah, now it's all Turkey, and they are going to invade into Greece, and they get a little bit, and they start island hopping too, and they land onto Crete and a bunch of the Greek island. With the help of Russia, they make some naval landings in and cut around into Bulgaria and Romania to cut off their coastal access to the Black Sea. And now Russia and Turkey are the only two countries that have access to the Black Sea other than Georgia and Ukraine, which are puppets of Russia. So the invasion of Greece keeps getting better, and they start on southern front against Bulgaria as well. Reinforcements are now coming into Bulgaria pretty quickly, and they manage to liberate the coast and sort of establish a defensive front against the aggressors. In the south, in here, there is a lot of naval aid being sent, and Crete is liberated, but the rest of the islands are not so fortunate. Up in the north, Finland is going to stage an offensive against St. Petersburg and are going down quickly and rapidly, going to get to the city. In St. Petersburg, there's a lot of panic about this invasion, and Russia does its best to send back forces to stop any Finns from getting into the country. Also, Finland is sending an offensive to cut across here and grab the only road. There's only one road that goes up this peninsula, and the Finns grab it, and essentially they just get all of this territory up here because they control the one road that goes up here. So they just own that now. And they manage to create kind of a stable front. And they are invading, and at this point they don't even want to advance. They're setting in their position and only advancing in the other side of this lake here. And all they want to do is stop the Russians from getting any other progress up here. So this is kind of a back and forth war, and it doesn't really seem clear who will win. Of course, America is supporting the Allies, but they aren't providing any serious aid or anything. And they're certainly not providing any troops. So back in the Polish front, Poland continues to invade into Belarus and Ukraine, and even Kaliningrad and Lithuania. Kaliningrad is pretty close to Poland, and they will just fall, and they keep trying to liberate Lithuania. Eventually, the Latvian and Lithuanian fronts are merged, and the Russians are slowly pushed out of the coast of the Baltics. Things are starting to look pretty bad for Russia at this point, and they decide they need to switch up their strategy. They are going to they're going to set all other fronts aside and go straight for Warsaw, and they're going to basically give up on the front with Turkey in Romania and Bulgaria, give up on the front in Ukraine give up on the front in Finland and give up on the front in the Baltics to push forward as much as possible into Poland and into Warsaw. And they managed to recapture a lot of lost land and push into Poland for the first time. And with their troops moving up from Ukraine, they meet and push even farther into Poland. Here they're at the doorstep of Warsaw, and this is going to be the most definitive battle of the war. At this point, most of Europe all of Europe is involved almost, except for Switzerland and Serbia, and a lot of the world is involved if you think about it. Not like any of Africa or South America or Oceania, but Asia and Europe and North America. The Poles are gonna fight really hard to defend their city, their capital, from the Russians, but at a certain point, the Russians have sent everything they can at this city, and they're going to take it with fierce resistance, and it's gonna cost them a lot of resources to hold Warsaw. But since the Russians were sent all their troops into Warsaw, they are starting to lose on other fronts, such as Ukrainian front. They are losing, and they lose all their gains in Romania, and Romania starts to push into Ukraine as well. And even they are starting to land on Crimea and enter Russia proper. The Ukrainian front is looking pretty bad, and there was a lot of land ceded, as well as in the Baltic front. Lithuania was eventually completely taken back, along with almost all of Latvia, and there was 2 landings in Estonia that were successful. Back in the north, there's Finland, who is pushing and almost is at the edge of St. Petersburg and kind of gets a stable front with only 3 fronts they have to defend. It's really hard for Russia to actually push back without seriously committing a lot of forces. Now, this is looking pretty bad for Russia at this point, but Turkey is willing to help because they don't want to be alone in fighting NATO. So they send a lot of troops and stuff into southern Ukraine and take back a lot of the coastal areas and even help liberate Crimea and let Russia keep its territorial sovereignty. They're also pushing into more Greek islands and eventually take over all of Crete and some more islands and get into the main area of Greece, pushing with their northern flank as well. At this point, Greece is looking like they're about to collapse, but NATO is really against this. But the government is folding on all sides to Turkey, and they are losing the war severely. And eventually, Turkey just takes over all of Greece. Now, with that front kind of dealt with, and Greece being pretty defensible, they send their navy out this way and start attacking into Bulgaria and taking the coast and reuniting with some Russian troops here, taking over the Black Sea once again. Now, in Warsaw, there are a lot more riots, and the Russians are competing with a lot of guerrilla warfare, along with external pressures from Polish attempts to recapture the city, and the rebels in the city are putting a lot of pressure on the Kremlin to do something. And so they determined that they're losing a lot of materials and men in the city, and so they decide to retreat from the city, and Poland is ruthless in their counterattack, and they drive and capture the forces, and they even manage to link up and encircle a large amount of Russian forces. They are forced to surrender as they are whittled down, and that is a huge blow to Russia. Turkey is pretty pissed at Russia at this point because they kind of thought that they would be fighting alongside a competent ally, but they weren't. And so they're pretty pissed about that, and they decide to kind of talk with NATO, and they come to an agreement where Greece will be restored, but Turkey will have claims on Cyprus, and along with that, they will declare war on Russia with them. So, with that, Turkey has officially switched sides and has given up all of its Greek possessions, along with their invasion of Romania and Bulgaria. Now, Russia is about to collapse here. They have war on all sides, and they haven't really gotten any gains, And with Poland threatening Minsk and Kiev, and Turkey threatening Crimea, and Finland threatening St. Petersburg. After a long siege, St. Petersburg falls, Minsk falls, and Kiev falls under Allied control. Next, Tallinn is also liberated, and the Russians are pushed back, and the Baltics are completely taken over by the Allies. This is the end of the Russian expansion, and now they are on a defensive campaign to make sure that they can maintain as much territory as they can, which for Russia, they can probably hold out quite a long time. But they're having a lot of uprisings in a lot of their major cities, and they've lost a lot of their major cities, like St. Petersburg, like Minsk, and like Kiev. And they start losing a lot of land, and they lose Crimea eventually, and along the coast of Ukraine and what used to be Ukraine, which is now Russia. And even more encirclements happen, taking over most of Ukraine, and Ukraine is liberated after that. In the north, the Baltics are pretty pissed at Russia and decide to join up with Poland and have a massive counterattack. And this is all of these NATO nations are attacking, and Russia is all a flat plane, and they are really failing. They try in one last burst of adrenaline to rush and capture back Minsk, St. Petersburg, and Kiev, but they manage to capture back Kiev because it's right next to their military hotspots. But Minsk is too far out of the way, and they lose a lot of men without getting much progress. And St. Petersburg, they make a little bit of progress, but the casualties are out of this world, and Russia is bound to collapse. And the West is encroaching in and takes back Kiev after a decisive battle. In the south, Turkey invades Georgia in order to get to Russia, and they take over the Caucasus region, uniting with Crimea and moving the flank up, eventually connecting with the Polish armies in southern Russia. Of course, Russia is pretty big, but most of their population lives like here, or honestly like here. So in the chaos, there are going to be some more countries that join the blue team, but they aren't going to necessarily be like allied with NATO. They just want to benefit off of Russia being bad. And so Japan and China are both going to take advantage of the opportunity to take Russian land, and they're going to send invasions into Vladivostok and Japan into whatever this island is called. And it's kind of like poetic in a way that Japan and China, who are right now enemies, are working together to take down Russia and gain territory from them. And China has like a massive population advantage, so they kind of just swoop in and take over a lot of Russia. This used to be part of the Chinese sphere of influence and part of the Qing dynasty, but it was taken away by Russia, and now they are rightfully reclaiming it. And even they claim all of this part. Russia does not recognize that claim in the slightest. However, they can't really dispute it. So China becomes pretty big, and the only reason Mongolia exists is because of China, and they don't want to have an argument with Russia. But at this point, they don't even really care. So it's all Chinese now, and so it looks to be the end of the Russian state as a thing, and they sue for peace. And let's draw up this new world map. Okay, so these are what the borders look like. And you can probably see that Russia got absolutely shit on with these decisions that were made. And let's talk about them. So basically, Russia itself is in this country, and Siberia is split off into a completely different country over here. The rest of Siberia is given to China and Japan. Japan gets this area, China gets this area. Japan also gets all these islands, including this one. So Russia not doing too good. Same with Georgia, got all its land back, and Chechnya becomes a sovereign country, along with Black Sea land, which is this one right here. And it's basically just to weaken. Actually, no, it's going to be called Caucasus land. Sounds kind of weird, but whatever. And then Crimea is given back to Ukraine, along with most of Ukraine's previous territory, although it gets a little bit bigger. And Poland also gets bigger, and Poland and Ukraine both take some of Belarus's land. Belarus becomes independent again, even though they might not want to. They have. Along with that, Estonia and Latvia have both gotten land, and Finland has gotten a massive power boost and got a lot bigger. You can see that they got all the way up to St. Petersburg, and this is even more than they had when they were at their peak before World War II. Now, we can see, if we zoom out of the map, that if I turn on the border layer for what the borders used to look like, you can see that things have changed. Ukraine has taken a lot of Russian territory, along with Belarus being mostly the same place, but losing a lot of territory in many ways, along with Estonia and Latvia getting bigger, Poland getting bigger. Oh yeah, Poland also annexed Kaliningrad, and Finland doubled in size almost. And all these nations didn't exist except for Georgia. And out here, it's pretty obvious because this Chinese border and Mongolian border don't exist anymore. And yeah, this is looking pretty bad for Russia. I think the for sure winners of this conflict are China, Japan, Ukraine. I mean, Ukraine, it's hard to call them a winner because they were under Russian subjugation for so long, but they did manage to gain independence and even gain more territory and regain Crimea. They got what they wanted, but at a huge cost. Finland is probably one of the biggest winners, along with Poland, Ukraine. Turkey is somewhat a winner. They are no longer NATO, but they did get Cyprus. Honestly, they're probably one of the losers, but actually, yeah, they feel like, it feels like they're a loser now. Anyway, that's gonna be it. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe. All right, see you.